Delighted to welcome live onto the programme now Razvan Constantinescu, a candidate from the Patriots Party of the Romanian people, whose nomination was also rejected by the country's constitutional court. You are indeed most welcome, sir.
Hello.
How do you interpret Thierry Breton's comments that if the EU alleges interference in any election, that ballot can just be thrown out?
Thierry Breton just gave us an example of how incompetent is the European, or he was a former commissioner, I think.
Yes.
According to the organizers, the protest on Sunday here in Romania, January 12th, gathered approximately 100,000 participants at its peak, making it the largest demonstration in the past month and a half. This wave of discontent was triggered by the Constitutional Court's decision on December 6th to annul the elections even as they were underway. And it's important to remember that at the time of the decision, voting was still ongoing in the diaspora. I want to emphasize that the first protest, although small in scale, was organized on December 6th by my colleagues from the Romanian People's of Patriots Party, PPR, led by Deputy Mihai Lasca. At that time, there were widespread fears in the public sphere, including among sovereigntists, about escalating tensions and the risk of President Klaus Iohannis declaring a state of emergency. Let's not forget that President Iohannis extended his mandate without adhering to constitutional provisions, which allow such an extension only in cases of war or catastrophe. In the absence of such circumstances, the Constitution clearly stipulates that the interim president should be the president of the Senate. The people's anger over this stolen vote could not be contained. A significant moment occurred on December 30, when the Court of Appeal was hearing one of the actions to resume the second round filled with candidate Călin Georgescu. In front of the court, thousands of people spontaneously gathered to support him. I think there were 10,000 at that moment.
Even people, I believe, who didn't necessarily vote for that party, people who were afraid that democracy in Romania was being overridden.
Yes, of course, there were 2 million of votes for Călin Georgescu and 1.7 million for his country candidate. Since then, every day in major cities across the country, hundreds or even thousands of people have been protesting for the resumption of the second round of elections, the vacancy of the presidential position, considering that President Iohannis no longer has legitimacy, and the resignation of Ciolacu II government. This is the second government led by Ciolacu, deemed illegitimate as it was appointed by an illegitimate president. People are also demanding the resignation of the Constitutional Court judges who made the decision to annul the elections. The protest we are talking about was in January 12, and it was preceded by another massive gathering of January 10, when at the call of Călin Georgescu, over 20,000 people assembled in front of the Constitutional Court. They requested the issuance of an erratum to correct the second decision and allow the elections to proceed, thus respecting the will of the citizens.
Okay.
During this period, the governing coalition continues to ignore the voice of the people and is proceeding with efforts to organize new presidential elections from scratch. it appears that their plans include invalidating candidates deemed unsuitable. And among them will most likely to be Călin Georgescu in the front place.
Yeah.
In the fall, it was me, Mrs. Europarlamentar Diana Șoșoacă, and Father Ciprian Mega. We were the first denied. All three of us have clearly expressed our desire to keep Romania out of the war in Ukraine and to stop funding this war. It is expected that all those who openly criticize Romania's membership in NATO and the European Union will be excluded from the electoral race, thereby consolidating a controlled political climate. This approach raises questions about adherence to democratic principles and freedom of expressions in the electoral process. In fact, we are now in a pre-revolutionary state, a dispute that is favorable to the transition to revolution, because the state left the constitutional framework. In other words, it violated the contract it has with the citizens. The constitution is, in fact, the contract that state has with the citizens. Our republic is now in a coma, in clinical death. I'm a doctor as well. The right to vote, the freedom to vote were attacked. It is an unprecedented fact in history. Now, nowhere in the world has the electoral process been stopped during its unfolding. According to the law, this constitutional court can only cancel elections for intrinsic fraud in the voting process. For example, multiple voting, dysfunction of the votes, counting minutes in polling stations, and so on. And these facts cannot be corrected otherwise. For example, recounting the votes. So the legal order, the constitutional order, respect for the social contract, that is the constitution, and it must be restored.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, very, very clear message. And thank you for going into such detail for all that as well, and giving us a sense of what is actually unfolding in Romania. We've been talking to Dr. Răzvan Constantinescu, candidate from the Patriots Party of the Romanian people. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you too.